When the sun rose on that fateful day, Jerry Marks had been one of the lucky ones. He worked in a mine deep underground at the edge of a small town in the rural United States, which meant he didn't see what happened when day broke, when the light of the sun ravaged the earth. The first Jerry heard about it was when his son Kyle came racing into the mine, frantically tapping his dad's shoulder to get his attention. He'd run all the way from their tiny homestead under a fireproof blanket, thick and long enough to block the sunlight from touching any part of Kyle's skin. His older sister, Jerry's daughter Carly, hadn't been so lucky. Caught by the light, her body had turned to the consistency of warm candle wax, melting into a form that barely resembled human anymore. Jerry had been one of a handful of others working late in the mines that day. A few thought that young Kyle had made the whole story up and ventured up to the surface and into the light, only to meet the same twisted fate. The light morphed their bodies into monstrosities, anyone in the small rural community becoming an amorphous mass of human flesh. Eventually, those that stayed behind in the mine heard the voices of their loved ones, their wives, husbands, children, all calling out to them from outside. They promised that nothing was wrong, that it was a lovely sunny day outside, and the mine workers should clock out to come and enjoy it. More of them left, reassured by hearing their families that all was well, and once more, none of them were seen again. Only Jerry and Kyle were left, and it stayed that way for several months. The father and son had to adapt to life underground, only leaving the mine to forage for food, and only while wearing thick, dirty mining overalls, making sure not a single millimeter of skin was on display. If the sunlight touched them, they'd never make it back alive. Venturing out of the mine in his overalls, Jerry had seen the shuffling melted mass that had once been the townsfolk. He did his best to avoid it as he went house to house, making sure it never saw him while he raided cupboards and refrigerators. But he could see it, and among the blobs of bodies blended together, he saw something that resembled his daughter. It turned his stomach, not just knowing but actually witnessing what had happened to her. And it was made all the worse on the days that Carly called out to him and Kyle while they hid in the mine. It was clearly her voice, but there was something wrong about it. Perhaps knowing that she was a part of the melted monstrosity made it easier to resist her trying to coax them out into the light. It had almost been an entire year of life spent underground when Jerry and Kyle encountered their first actual human beings since all the other workers had left the mine. The pair that arrived were strange, wearing protective suits that covered them both head to toe. Just like Jerry and Kyle had quickly realized, these two were aware that not even the tiniest hint of the sun's unforgiving light could be allowed to reach them. The two approached Jerry and Kyle, seemingly coming in peace, although the father and son remained cautious of the newcomers. Making sure they were deep enough in the mine to avoid the sunlight at the stony entrance, the pair of them revealed their faces, confirming they were still fully human, before introducing themselves as Researcher Worth and Sergeant Booker of the SCP Foundation. Sitting down with Jerry, Worth explained what had really happened. He had been working for an organization that contained and studied anomalous creatures and phenomena, the Foundation. Booker had been a member of a special armed unit within the same establishment, or a mobile task force. But now the SCP Foundation itself had fallen, with a number of its own personnel turned into more of the amorphous fleshy creatures in the sunlight. "We spent a lot of years keeping all of this from the public," Worth admitted, sounding guilty, but implying the choice was out of his hands. "But I don't suppose there's any point in secrets anymore." It's the sun, you see, Mr. Marks." You can call me Jerry," he interrupted. "Sorry, Jerry," Worth corrected himself. "But something happened to the sun. It changed, decimated the entire planet in barely any time at all. I mean, all those people, millions, billions, all at once. Dear God." Worth took a moment as the existential dread of it all once again caught up with him. "It turned out the biggest anomaly was right above us," Booker continued for him. She sounded a lot more stoic, even a little coldly detached from it all. SCP-001, that's what the Foundation called it. "Is there a way to reverse it, or cure the people that the sunlight, changes?" Jerry asked, thinking of Carly. "You mean SCP-001-A? No, I'm sorry, Jerry. There's nothing we can do, the researcher said, failing to sound as recomposed as he pretended to be. Your daughter is gone, but at least you still have your... Worth paused, looking around at the mine. Even in the low light, there was no sign of Kyle. Jerry turned to scan the area. To his horror, his son had seemed to have vanished while they were talking. Instantly, panic caused him to think that Kyle had wandered out of the mine and into the sunlight, turning into part of what Worth had called SCP-001-A. But the boy would have had to walk past Jerry to start heading that direction. Plus, the father knew his son was far too scared to go outside after seeing what the son had done to Carly. Booker had a tactical bag filled with equipment, flashlights, spare batteries, even flares for whenever the power in those ran out. And both working and living in the mine so long, Jerry had maps, knew certain routes through the deep network of tunnels almost by heart. Between them, the three had enough to mount a search for the missing boy. Keeping together, they traversed away from the first of several large chambers, down into the dark depths of the mine. "Kyle!" his father yelled, his voice echoing through the tunnel. "Kyle, buddy, it's Dad! You there?" Walking behind him, Researcher Worth and Sergeant Booker parroted the calls, assuring the missing boy that they didn't mean him or Jerry any harm. As the trio walked deeper and deeper, they began to venture into a portion of the mine that had hardly been used by the workers. It was darker than the areas further up, while those had rows of electric lamps powered by long cables attached to generators. Down here, the only light came from the flashlights the group carried. "Kyle, come on out!" Jerry called out for his son again. "This isn't the time to split up. We need to stick together. Come on, son, I'm really worried here." Once again, there was no answer. Just then, Jerry caught the sight of Booker and Worth out of the corner of his eye. Both of them knew a lot about SCP-001, and the mine worker couldn't help the suspicion that added to his perception of them. After all, Kyle had never run off before now, and Jerry couldn't help but think, while his attention had been turned, that the pair of Foundation personnel had taken his son. "Dad?" a voice suddenly called out. Jerry's head spun on a swivel at the sound of Kyle calling for him. "Dad, where are you?" It echoed through the tunnel again. "That's him!" Jerry exclaimed to the other two. "Which way did they come from?" "Straight ahead, it sounds like," Booker replied. "Hold on," Worth interjected. "I think you two should look at this." The beam from his flashlight was pointed at the rocky floor of the tunnel. Something was gleaming wet against the stone, a large smear of red, like something had been dragged in the direction Kyle's voice was coming from. "Oh God, he could be hurt," Jerry said urgently. "Hurt might not be the right word, I'm afraid, Jerry," the researcher said solemnly. "There's a lot of blood here, too much." "All the more reason to go further and find where he's calling from," the father retorted angrily. "That's if it is the kid that's actually calling us," Booker replied, her and Worth exchanging a worried glance at each other. "You two know something, don't you?" Jerry demanded. "Does that thing from the outside, does it have my son too?" "Dad?" another voice called. Jerry froze, his blood as cold as the mine tunnel he stood in. He hadn't heard that voice in almost a year, but recognized it immediately. It was Carly, his daughter. It seemed impossible. He knew she had been merged into part of SCP-001-A when day broke, but now she was somehow calling out to Jerry. Her voice sounded clearer, like it had used to before she changed, and she wasn't trying to lure her father out into the sunlight either. For a moment, it seemed to Jerry like his daughter had somehow come back. "Dad, we're both over here," Carly's voice called again. "We need your help. Kyle's stuck." "Who's that?" Booker whispered. That's Carly," Jerry sniffed, holding back tears. "You said your daughter became a part of SCP-001-A, Worth pointed out. Maybe she got better?" the father asked hopefully. "I hate to say it, but that's definitely not her," Sergeant Booker replied. "We should turn back now if there's an anomaly in these tunnels. That's not going to be pretty for any of us," she added, turning to Worth. "What?" Jerry yelled. "What do you mean by that?" "Look, buddy, those aren't your children," the MTF agent said bluntly. "It sounded like SCP-001-A got them." No, the voices are too clear," Worth replied. "I think something else is in here." Before Jerry could explode with anger at how uninterested both Foundation personnel seemed at the fate of his children, another sound was heard. Footsteps, something shuffling closer, patting its feet on the stone. There was a low growl that filled the tunnel, as whatever it was came closer still. "Dad?" the voice of Carly repeated, sounding only a few feet away now. "Where are you, Dad?" Kyle's voice immediately followed it. Behind came the sound of Booker striking a flare. As it erupted into a plume of light and heat, she threw it down the tunnel, and there they were. Not Jerry's children, but instead a pair of nightmarish creatures. They backed away from the flare slightly, but the light still illuminated their blood-red forms, walking on all fours like wolves. The creatures' elongated heads were missing any eyes, just jaws filled with rows of sharp, red fangs. "Dad," came Kyle's voice again, emanating from one of the monsters. It was mimicking Jerry's son, both of his kids. Even having seen SCP-001-A at a distance, the father could barely believe his eyes. 939s! Booker yelled the second her flare illuminated them. "Run!" She pulled a sidearm and opened fire, the bang of each shot ringing loudly through the tunnel. The pair of 939s pounced at her while Jerry and Worth turned to run back the way they had come. As the creatures attacked, the echoes of the gunfire were replaced with blood-curdling screams. "What the hell are those things?" Jerry yelled in a panic. "SCP-939, researcher Worth panted. "Too much to explain. They're pack hunters and they're vicious." "What about Kyle and Carly? I heard their voices." "That's what those monsters do. They mimic human speech to draw us out. We're their prey. There's no telling how long they've been down here. They might have retreated to the mine to avoid the sun on the surface," Worth yelled. The sound of the SCP-939s getting closer were catching up, right on Jerry and Worth's heels. "Why would they come down here for?" The mine worker huffed, slightly ahead of the researcher given his slightly stronger physique. "To escape the sunlight," Worth replied. "SCP-939s hate His sentence was overtaken by a scream as one of the blood-red creatures caught Worth by the ankle, knocking him down and pulling him back to be devoured. Jerry didn't look back. He just kept running back through the tunnel. The sound of SCP-939 calling after him and Kyle and Carly's voices made it even harder not to stop and turn, even just for a second. But he reminded himself that if he stopped running, then he couldn't lure the creatures out of the mine and into the sunlight. It wasn't how he'd ever wanted to go out, but maybe that way Jerry would see his kids again. Now go and check out SCP-001 Can SCP-049 Finally Cure When Day Breaks? And SCP-001 When Day Breaks, SCP-682 for more horrifying When Day Breaks scenarios.